talking Memphis wrestling with Randy Hales and special guests.
I missed you guys last Tuesday. We did not have a talk in Memphis wrestling. And man, oh man, I got used to you guys. I got used to coming at you every Tuesday night with the crew, with Talking Memphis Wrestling, my panel, and we have a great time together. But I was having surgery. I think you know the story, and I think you can see the difference now as you're looking at me in this picture. I had cataract surgery, as my buddy Barry Hayes in the house. Hey, Barry, it has been a while, and it's good to hear from you. Good evening, RH and everybody else. And Tanner is in the house as well. Rod, Barry, everybody in the house, as I'm almost a week from cataract surgery. Do you see anything different? Do you see anything new? It's something that's new to me and probably been new for me for 40 years. I'm broadcasting this show. I am reading these comments like PJ saying, hello, everybody. Certainly, Tanner is asking, how improved is your eyesight now? My eyesight now in my right eye is 20/25. It's almost perfect. I can see better than I have had in 50 years in the right eye. The left eye will be done a week from tomorrow. And then, man, I can't wait. It is unbelievable. So I appreciate that very much. I completely appreciate all the prayers and all the wishes and all that sort of thing. Going under the knife again, seeing better than I have in 50 years. Now, at the top, I'll let everybody know that Pat Trammell will not be on the show today. Adam Dunn is producing, but he is in the house and not in master control. He will not be on screen. And if he has to, he'll pop in and talk to us a little bit. Chris Ellis, Coach Chris, one of his racing buddies, passed away unexpectedly last night, and he's with the family, and it's a very sad situation. So prayers for him. Well, last week we didn't have a show. The week before, my buddy Michael St. John wasn't in the house. He's looking at the new Randy Dandy, the new RH, the Randy without glasses. I can read this screen. I can drive without glasses. And the good thing is, everybody, the left eye still has not been done. Now, Tanner tells the world he'll be right back. Also, Adam is doing good after the storm. They had a little storm about an hour ago. I'm going to get the notes out there with no further ado. He did the Kentucky Derby. I did my thing. We've both been busy. We're rocking and rolling. And the tag team of Michael St. John and Randy Hales, it's just us today. He's in the room early. And I want to welcome Michael St. John back to Talking Memphis Wrestling. Michael, you look good too as well.
I'm proud of you, Randy. You look great, and congratulations on your eye surgery. You know, my dad had that done about 20 years ago, and he put it off for like years because he was
Me too.
But he said once it's done, he could see better than I could see, and God rest his soul. That was a great thing. But you look great, and congratulations. I'm proud of you, buddy.
A voice from my past life, and I don't think you were in the USWA at the time. I would guess it was 95, maybe 96. I think it was 96. We had a wrestler, and Lawler was booking. I took my leave of absence because I got hooked on cocaine real bad. I've told that story a million times, and I needed a leave of absence. And Lawler took over for me at my request. He didn't know why I just said I was burned out. And by the way, I apologize. There's some dude at my window weed eating. So if you hear that, and Adam will mute me when Michael was talking. But I want to say hello to the Macho Warrior Rick Hogan. It's Todd Cooper. Todd, Rick Hogan in the house. I managed him on Hill Randy. So back to you, Michael, and it's time for, as I've said my first take, I'm telling you guys I can see. Man, Michael, I just, to be honest with you, I just assumed you're a few years older than me, and I was assumed Michael just not as good. Can't be, no way in hell be the same good looking guy he was back in the day when we first met in the 80s. But I just assumed because I couldn't really see you. But I see you now completely, and you look like $1 million, man.
God bless you, buddy. I appreciate you saying that. And I want to say this is today started off on a note that has never started this my day off ever before. And I got an email from a friend of mine who said Benici had posted a video of my first wrestling show on Channel 5 with Dave Brown subbing in for Lance Russell back in 1981. Well, I had a live event in Gunnersville at Wilkes Tire and Battery today, and they're great people. They've been fans of Fun Radio ever since we put it on the air, and they're a great family, great tire store. And I showed them the video, and all of a sudden they wanted everybody to see it in the building. But I want to thank Panigi for that. That started off my day, and bless your heart, I hope we're saying your name correctly. And you are just a wonderful wrestling fan and a great person, and we really, really appreciate what you do. My rant, though, today, Randy, are you hip to like uniforms on sports teams, baseball, football, so forth and so on?
I don't guess I would be hip, but I was listening to the front row with Bud Rowe. And by the way, let me backtrack a little bit. Macho Man Rick Hogan, and he's watching the show today. And Adam, the great producer he is, there's a picture of me as Randy X, Corey Macklin, and Macho Man or Macho Warrior Rick Hogan. Did you ever see Michael? And I know I'm interrupting you, but I want to go with the flow with the conversation. And certainly, I thought that Todd, the Macho Warrior, would like seeing a picture of him. A combination Randy Savage Hulk Hogan deal, and it was a interesting character that met. Now they mentioned a thing on front row with Bud Rose on controversies about uniforms and people changes uniforms, and some people's like the Yankees are never going to change from what the Yankees are. The Lakers are never going to change from there. So you take it from there.
Well, I'm a traditionalist, and I love baseball, I love football, I love basketball, I love all sports. But I was raised a Cincinnati Reds fan. My dad was from Dayton, Ohio, which of course is the hometown of where Lance Russell was born. And I've always been a Reds fan. I have Reds gear. When I was a little kid, I always wanted a Reds uniform. I never got one. We just couldn't afford it. We lived far enough away you couldn't get it. And the first thing I bought Joshua, of course, when I took him to a Reds game was a Reds jersey. And I'm like living my life through my grandson now.
Great.
But, Nike is always, and they're a company, and to Phil Knight's credit, they're a company that's always coming up with something new to get people to buy into. And whether it's shoes, whether it's whatever it is they're doing, now it's baseball jerseys. And years ago, I'm going to say 6 or 7 years ago, Nike got the NBA franchise, and then they got Major League Baseball's franchise. And they got to supply the uniforms for all the Major League Baseball. Back in the day, it was Russell. It went to Majestic. Then, of course, Nike got the contract. Well, Nike, to outdo and to always produce something new that people will spend money on, came up with a thing called the City Connect baseball jersey. And it is they're basically trying to tie the city's heritage of whatever town it is, Miami, San Diego, Milwaukee, whatever town it is, with that town's baseball team, but produce a new uniform, like a third or a fourth uniform for these guys to wear. And they came out with the City Connect. Well, a couple of them they really hit home runs on. I love the Miami one. It talks about and approaches Cuban culture. It really focuses on the Cuban culture of South Florida and Miami. The colors are the old Cuban national team's colors. Beautiful uniform. They did the same in San Diego for the Hispanic culture. They did a great Dodgers. I mean, very simple Dodgers. It's a Dodger blue jersey with the words Los Dodgers across it. Gorgeous. Best one they did, in my opinion, the Colorado Rockies. Rocky Mountains in the background, the words Colorado, of course, in front of it. Beautiful jersey. Well, they released a series of these starting, I think it was 3 years ago, and it came up now to the Cincinnati Reds. And the Cincinnati Reds are the oldest professional baseball team in America, founded in 1869. And they came out and they had this big to-do on 5/13, the fifth month, 13th day, which is, of course, the area code for Cincinnati, Ohio, 513. And they came out with the quote-unquote Cincinnati Reds City Connect jerseys. And I don't have a picture of it out, and unfortunately, I should have pulled one, but Adam, if you've got one that's out there. I'm a Reds fan, a traditionalist. The Reds colors are red, white, a little black background or outline. Really nice, and their uniforms are very conservative in today's time. So Nike comes out with this City Connect thing, and it is the most god-awful, atrocious, horrible logo. It doesn't say, it says Cincy across. And by the way, don't put.
Michael, we lost your audio.
My cat sat on the I'm sorry. Getting back though, it has the word Cincy across the front of the jersey, but don't go hashtag Cincy on Twitter or you're going to get some surprises you really don't want to see. But the fact of the matter is they're black on black with this god-awful logo.
What?
And I woke up Saturday and I was like, okay, I'm looking forward to seeing what they would do for Cincinnati. It's the Queen City. It has a great German heritage, beer. It's a beautiful town, a beautiful city. And the Reds are the oldest team in baseball. So why not, do a City Connect jersey connecting the city of Cincinnati and all that it has, the Queen City. They come off with this god-awful thing.
Look, and Michael, Adam's great. Is that what you're talking about?
That is, and that's Joey Votto, and he's modeling it. And the Cincinnati, the Red Sea that they came up with looks like something that a stove factory would use. And the words, I'm sorry. This, in my opinion, and I've been a lifelong Reds fan. I went to the first game my daddy and Uncle Joe took me when I was 7 years old. I love the Reds. I absolutely hate this combination. And I hope the people of Cincinnati will just have a mass burning of these god-awful things pretty soon, because that's horrible. That is an atrocious, to be a City Connect jersey, to connect a city's heritage with the baseball players' jerseys and uniforms they wear. Whoever is in the creative team at Nike that came up with this, A, they're smoking crack or they're on meth. And number two, the logo looks like something that a stove manufacturer would put off. I'm sorry. I hate it. I'm not going to own it. I'm not going to buy it. I'm not allowing my grandson to even look at it. This is horrible. This would be like taking Memphis professional wrestling and putting it in somebody's backyard at a mud show. This is terrible. That's my rant. Love you, Randy.
All right. Appreciate that very much. And I love the rant, a little emotion from Michael St. John. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in just a minute, throw something that's not on the notes. And when I get to that point, Michael, I want you to pay attention, because I have instructions for you and you have to follow my directions to make this segment work. So you got to be attentive and listen to me when we get to that point. But I want to tell everybody that I'm real happy with the show. And, I spend time thinking about different subjects and different things we talk about. I do have photos of the day. We'll do that later. I have a surprise video of the day we'll get to in just a few minutes. But the main event of the show today, I thought, because I was seeing some previews of the show that's on Vice Television. It premiered, I believe, in 2019. It was Dark Side of the Ring, Dark Side of Wrestling. So we will review the first 3 seasons in quick fashion. We'll go through every episode and just talk about certain subjects. And then we will really, with as opinionated as I can be, and Michael is, and all that sort of thing, as we get into the subject of the dark side, and some of it more sad than dark, but the dark side of Memphis wrestling. And that's the featured thing. So, folks, stay around for our BS that we're going to do till we get there, because that's the main event segment. Now, put Michael St. John on the screen for instructions. For instructions on this thing. We're going to watch a video. And and you need to turn your microphone back on.
You got it. Okay.
We are going to watch a video. Now, as a lifelong broadcaster, as a lifelong programmer of broadcasting, as a lifelong wrestling guy, as a lifelong programmer, music director, everything you've done, and a judge of talent and somebody's produced talent. I am going to show clips of a broadcaster. And this is what I want you, and I can call it out once we see the video. We're going to get your opinion of this broadcaster on his likability, on his voice, on his appearance on television, on his professionalism. We asked the question if this announcer got across the message that he was trying to see. We want to discuss your opinion on whether this announcer has credibility. And also, if you feel this guy is somebody you would hire, and also, do you think this announcer has the ability to be on network television? So do you got all that criteria?
You may have to run it one at a time.
I will.
Remember all of it.
But you understand it.
And actually, that's sort of the criteria that anybody, any good programmer would use, either TV or radio, on hiring talent. You're going to ask all of those questions.
Let's watch this video that I'm not even telling you what it is. I just hope Adam, who we just have one video, so he can't get confused on what video to air, because we just have one video in our list of stuff there. So roll this video and listen and watch.
Congratulations to all the inductees into the Memphis Wrestling Hall of Fame. Thanks for joining Lance and I. We're honored to be there with you. Beautiful Bobby Eaton, I remember when you came in, watched you develop as a wrestler in the Memphis area. Gilbert family, there are only a few families that have actually made their name in wrestling, but certainly Tommy, Eddie, and Doug, you've done it. You made your name, you made your mark in Memphis, Tennessee. Coco Beware, what can I say? The man from Union City, Tennessee, turned into a superstar not only here, but in other wrestling organizations too. And of course, don't forget Frankie, the Bird. How many times did we do that angle where somebody came in supposedly dining on what was left of Frankie? Jimmy Cornette, oh my goodness. Kid with a camera, developed into a manager, a promoter, a little bit of everything in the wrestling business. Congratulations. My buddy Jimmy Hart, the Mouth of the South. I knew him when he was in the Gentrys and did Keep on Dancing and other hits around the area. And he sure saved the territory at one time due to a broken leg by our star wrestler at the time. Congratulations, Jimmy. Superstar Bill Dundee. Well, I could talk for a half hour, and I'm not going to do that, about the contribution you have made to Memphis wrestling. Thank you, Bill, and congratulations. Special thanks to referee Jerry Calhoun. When the big match came up, he's the one that got the nod. He was the one that refereed the Andy Kaufman-Jerry Lawler match. He's the one that refereed so many of the big matches that we have, and a most deserved induction tonight into the Memphis Wrestling Hall of Fame. Finally, what can I say? The King, Jerry Lawler. Jerry started as a kid making drawings, sent them to Lance, and developed into the King, a name that he took, but a title that he grew to deserve. King, Thank you for everything you've done for us, and welcome to the Memphis Wrestling Hall of Fame.
This was from 2017. We did a Hall of Fame ceremony, and we'll show highlights of that next week on Talking Memphis Wrestling. But this was from 2017. We did the ceremony at Jerry Lawler's Hall of Fame Bar and Grill at 159 Bill Street in Memphis, Tennessee. The first question I'm going to ask you, Michael, real quick, had you ever seen that piece of video?
No, I haven't. That was the first time.
So we will go through this. This particular young upstart in the broadcasting business, we'll go through this again. You are grading him as a programmer, as somebody hiring talent, his likability.
Comes across very strong, very real. He's talking to you, not to a camera, not to a big audience. Very much A+.
A+, and we'll give all these the letter grades. I meant to say that. How about this gentleman's voice?
I've always loved Dave Brown's voice. He's a radio guy, got a deep voice, has that inflection and that intonement, but he knows how to use it. A+.
Professionalism.
You know, in this, if we're just talking about this particular video, I'm going to give him an A. And the only reason I'm not giving him an A+ is the Memphis Hall of Fame to me is something that you guys were just kicking off. It was something very, very special, but he did it on a boat dock. And I sort of got, and I understand it's probably it was a beautiful scene. Don't get me wrong.
It's in his backyard.
Okay. And I appreciate that. But is that the right setting or background for the Memphis Wrestling Hall of Fame?
Well, it's my fault because I asked him to do it there. I thought it'd be cool. I called that shot.
You.
Yeah, penalize me, not Dave, because I called the shot.
All right. What was the next one?
The next one is, did announcer get across the point he was attempting to make,
Absolutely.
which was put over the event?
Absolutely. That's another A+ because he took each individual star that was being inducted into the Hall of Fame, had something different to say about each one of them, got across the point very quickly, I might add, and I think it's an A+.
Credibility. Does this announcer have any credibility at all?
Don't even ask the question. A+, A+, A+.
And the last one, if you were programming a network, would this guy get a job for Michael St. John?
If I were Tony Khan, I would have hired him first day and let everything else build around him. Dave Brown is the best person alive today capable of doing a national wrestling show and doing it the right way, in my humble opinion.
Now, I want to talk a little. I appreciate that, and I hope everybody enjoyed that segment. We'll get to pictures of the week in a little bit, but one thing I want to talk about, modern wrestling news, and in the news, of course, Michael, lately is AEW. A couple of things of note. I want to put up the AEW All In graphic, and that's been going on with the pre-sale and everything for Wembley Stadium on August the 27th. And again, if we can put All In up there in London, and that's a good little graphic. And they did a tremendous amount of pre-sale tickets. I don't even know how that works, but 30,000, 35,000. And at this point, they're at 70,000 people. And that's absolutely unbelievable. 65 or 70,000 people. And the event's in August. I mean, that is unfreaking believable. I want to put up the generic AEW graphic, if we could do that for sure. All right. We have that up there. And this is, we have to believe everything there is to be that's on the internet. And this is a rumor, total rumor. But rumors have suggested AEW's TV deal that supposedly will be announced tomorrow at the Warner Brothers media deal press conference Apparently, the rumor said AEW's TV deal will be worth $1 billion, but estimates don't appear to have been high enough. According to Wade Keller of Pro Wrestling Torch, AEW's new deal with Warner Brothers Discovery is expected to be worth approximately $240 million per year over 5 years, bringing the total sum to $1.2 billion. The deal supposedly will bring in $4.6 million per week to All Elite Wrestling. Also rumored, along with the debut show of Collision, new show that will be aired on Saturday nights, like the Classic Georgia Championship Wrestling. Keller noted that the expectation is also a content agreement between AEW and the new Max streaming service, part of HBO Max, but Max streaming service will be announced tomorrow. Speculation has suggested the AEW All In from London will air on Max in the United States to avoid the promotion running 2 pay-per-views within 7 days in a row. So we have a lot to do. Rapid fire, your thoughts on those 2 pieces of business, Michael. I think it's nothing but great for the whole industry and for the boys, mainly for the boys and the girls. If there's somebody else, WWE has to be competitive in pay. And obviously there is the WWE, so AEW has to be competitive in pay to survive.
The numbers are mind-boggling.
If that's true.
Well, if it's true, I cannot wrap my head around those numbers. I know what TV ads go for in the markets that I'm involved in. I know what national rates are for the most part. This streaming thing it's exploding already. We all know that. But I think this streaming thing is going to turn out to be a total pay-per-watch event type thing in the next few years. I think you're going to have, instead of having Dish Network or Direct TV where you've got 200 channels plus or whatever, and you just go channel to channel, what's happening, and Dish just finished their national meetings last week in Orlando, Florida. What's happening is that the providers of programming are asking for astronomical fees from Dish Network and Direct TV to air their programming. And they've got the providers, i.e. the people that run Direct TV and run Dish Network, over a barrel, because if they pay those fees, then your fee for having Dish Network or Direct TV is going to run from maybe $7,500 a month to $250, $300 a month. And not a lot of people can afford it, especially the common worker in the United States of America with everything else going up. So what's happening is your streaming services are grabbing, for $15 a month or $29 a month or $11.95 a month, you're going to get HBO Max streaming. You're going to get Peacock streaming. But the problem is, to watch everything you want to watch, you're going to have 15 different streaming channels. Right. So I think we're all getting pulled over a barrel as consumers. For the wrestling business, I couldn't agree with you more, Randy. I think it's fabulous. For Tony Khan, God bless you, buddy. You turn something into something huge, and it's making a lot of money for you. But nobody ever said or accused Tony or his dad of not being able to make money. They know how to make money. People have criticized the product. People have criticized how the product is presented. People have criticized a lot about what Tony Khan and his company have done. But golly, wow. They've done something right, because they just got a gazillion contract with Warner Brothers, who is one of the top providers of programming in the world.
Again, if the rumors are true, certainly, and that's the key word. It's interesting, and it will be interesting. The new Collision show, the rumor is that CM Punk will be back, and he will be featured on that show, because he don't want to work on a show with the Young Bucks, and the Young Bucks don't want, and Omega don't want to work on it. It's a mess. It's an absolutely mess. That's where it's time.
Is Dave Brown going to be the announcer on Collision? That should be a home run.
I guarantee it's your announcer of the year, old Sockface Excalibur. I guarantee you, the Bucks vice presidents love the guy. Tony loves the guy. I think, honestly, I'll be professional here. I think he's not good, and that's nice.
He's the drizzling shits.
That's what came in my head. I want to say hello to Melinda. I want to say I appreciate everybody comments, and we can talk. And I will say this, even though especially Jim Cornette and Michael St. John early on, critical of the product. It's different than what we did. It's also a lot different than what the WWE does. But honestly, that's a good business strategy, because if you were WWE light, you would be WWE light. So even though they have some WWE names, it's their own style, and they're trying to build a base and an alternative, and they never will be as big as the WWE. Never in history of the world will be as big as the WWE, especially with that endeavor, you think, Michael? But it's alternative and financially much better situation what TNA when they started out, because honestly, Tony Khan's dad has more money than Dixie Carter's dad did.
Well, here's my point.
Heck.
Well, here's my point. And you made a great point just then. And I don't want to gloss over it. I want to make sure people understand this. If you're going to compete, whether it's in radio, whether it's in TV, whether it's in wrestling, whatever the case may be, you don't want to be what the other guy is. You want to be different. When Kicks 104 came on the air in Nashville, we were in Gallatin, Tennessee. We were 35 miles away. And we had a strong signal, and there were 2 top 40 stations in Nashville. But I didn't do what they did. I did something different. I put personality on the air, and not only did I put personality there, I started playing songs that they wouldn't play, i.e. disco, because disco was hot in 1978, 77. So we maximized our efforts on that. We provided something different. I did that when I came right here to Alabama and put my first radio station on the air that I bought. Nobody was doing oldies. Guess what we did? We did oldies. You got to do something different. But when you do something different, you got to promote the living bejesus out of it, because you got to let people know it's different. You don't have to let them know it's better or worse. You just let them know it's different. People will gravitate to it. I will give Tony Khan a lot of credit with that. I will also say this, and you may disagree with me on this, Randy. I think personally, AEW Wrestling's brand has changed and improved, not to a great expanse, but a bit enough for wrestling fans from the earlier eras to accept it more since the arrival of Jeff Jarrett. I don't know how much input he has, but I got a feeling it's something, and whatever it is, it's taking root.
Yeah, obviously Tony would be a fool. And sometimes I think he's a fool because the announcer he uses, that's my biggest complaints. Absolutely my biggest complaint, 100%, is that is about the announcer and the different things. But Jeff is there. He's involved in the live events and the promotion, all that. I have no idea, because I hadn't talked to him specifically about that, how much creatively. However, I have heard that his segments on the television show, obviously Tony likes them and the fans like them. They're very high-rated segments, and I think it's great. You can't beat Jeff Jarrett. I mean, you can't beat old Jeffro at all.
Let me add one thing, too. And Randy, I know where we're going on this, but let me just say this. Wrestling announcers have gone, and think about this. They've gone from the glory days of the great announcers like the Lance Russells and the Dave Browns of the world. They've gone from those guys to Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone and those guys. And then they've gone down to whoever not Adam Cole, but the Cole guy that's on
Michael Cole.
Michael Cole. They've gone down to Michael Cole and his counterpart and so forth and so forth. When you watch Monday Night Raw, they've got an English guy. I don't even know his name. I don't even know his name. And they've got a color guy that is all tatted up and is married to one of the girl wrestlers.
Corey Graves.
Corey Graves. Corey's not that bad, but he ain't Jerry Lawler. No. And there's no personality to that. Corey Graves is a heel type announcer, but doesn't have the personality to get it over the way Jerry Lawler did. Right. So we've gone from that. Now we've got a masked guy who, like you say, the Cucamonga kids like, and Tony accepts because Tony was big and loved. He lived for owning his own wrestling company, and he got to live his dream. God bless him. I love it, boy. But at the same time, he's let the inmates run the asylum for so long.
Absolutely.
He finally got Jeff Jarrett, who's a man with a lot of common sense and even more wrestling knowledge, and he's starting to listen to Jeff. And I can tell it. I can tell it by what's shown on TV. The announcers are still, I'll tell you, if they're not doing lines of cocaine or doing meth before the shows, I'm not talking about Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone. I'm talking about the other goobers. Then I'm misplacing my bet on that. But I got a feeling that those guys are whacked out before they ever meet the show. Jim Ross, I can hear in his commentary, I've heard this for a long time. Jim is a great professional, one of the greatest that's ever cracked a microphone in our business, in the professional wrestling business. But Jim is tired. Jim is an older person. Jim and I are the same age, and he's having to travel. He's having to do things.
And he had cancer.
And he had cancer. He's God bless him. I hope he's well and continue to hope that, but I can just hear it in his voice. He's not the same Jim Ross. Tony Schiavone, I'm sorry. And I know he hired his name, but I have no love lost for Tony as an announcer. I've met him a couple of times. He's a nice guy, but I don't think he's that great of an announcer. And he doesn't add anything to this program, nothing to this program. But at the same time, the WWE announcer side ain't doing any better. They're not doing any favors for themselves and not taking advantage of a situation where they could with a good announcer. To me, out there in the wings, Ian Riccaboni. I always thought Ian Riccaboni was a good announcer for wrestling.
I agree.
And I think he would be good on either one of those shows. I saw Kevin Kelly the other day on one of the YouTube shows. He sort of lost his edge as well. But I never thought he was a great announcer. The guy that used to be the guy for ECW, and I can't recall his name right now. Joey Styles. To me, you could take a Joey Styles and give him direction, and he'd be perfect on AEW as well. Dave Brown, sitting home retired. Dave Brown would be over the top on either one of those shows. But I just personally think, as an announcer, and I know I'm talking about people of my peers, but at the same time, I think the level of announcing and the professionalism of announcing and the knowledge of wrestling announcing has gone from here to here over the past 2 decades.
Adam's got us a picture, and we'll pop that up on the screen. Hopefully, we will. How about that? What do you think?
I like that.
Vince, Kennedy McMahon and good old LR. I think that's an appearance where Lance was the guest of Jerry Lawler at the FedEx Forum. That's a pretty cool picture of Lance, and the greatest, I think, of all time, Lance Russell. And we'll go right ahead with our featured photos of the day, and we will start with our featured card of the week, rapid fire on these segments, and we will go to the oldest card I've ever shown here on this show, to my knowledge. It's from my hometown of Jonesboro, Arkansas. It's from May the 3rd, 1963. It's before Eddie Marlin started promoting Jonesboro. Dwayne Peele, Buddy Wayne was the local promoter. It was a Goulas Welch production. They had their own local TV show on Channel 8, KAIT, Channel 8. I was born in 61, so I did not watch this show. I didn't discover wrestling to the early 70s at Channel 13 in Memphis, and the Channel 8 show was long gone. A 2-match card, Big Jim Holly against Jimmy Stewart, in the main event, Johnny and Jack Long against the fabulous Jackie Fargo and Dwayne Peel. Rapid fire, please, Michael. Ton of content left. Your thoughts on that classic card from '63 in my hometown?
I bet it drew money. I'll say that. And Jim Holly, was Big Jim Holly not the dad of the boys from Mobile?
I'm not sure.
I want to say he was. I had a chance to meet Johnny Long, and underrated wrestler, good wrestler back in the day. Fargo and Buddy Wayne against the Long brothers. I'd have paid admission to see that. That'd be a heck of a match.
Todd Alexander asked a question. I don't know what. Hopefully, you will be able to answer this question. He says, Randy, could you ask Michael off topic? And we tend to do that on the show. Off topic about the Casino Magic pay-per-view that flopped. I have no idea what he's talking about. Rapid fire on this, please.
Well, what came out of that was one of the most viewed interviews ever featuring me, and I had nothing to do with it other than I was holding a mic and holding up Jake Roberts, who was totally messed up. I don't know how I got involved in this, to be honest with you. There was a manager working for Reno Riggins in Nashville, and he called me up one day and said, hey, they'd like you to do some on-camera work on a pay-per-view at Casino Magic. It was Legends of Wrestling, and it was at Casino Magic in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, and went down, did the show, ended up being the backstage interviewer in the tuxedo, whole 9 yards. The wrestlers were there all day. The pay-per-view started at 7 o'clock at night. We had to be there at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And the majority of them had been cavorting all night and or drinking and or doing other things. So about the time that the wrestling show started, the guy that was promoting it, and I want to say he was a gentleman out of Massachusetts or maybe Rhode Island, Connecticut, up in the Northeast, had booked a bunch of Yokozuna was on that card. We had I'm just, names are running through my. Sensational Sherry was there. Dr. Lou Albano was there. A bunch of Snuka, Jimmy Snuka was there. We had a bunch of people there. We had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. I don't drink and certainly don't do drugs, but back then I would talk to guys, and I had all my notes written. I was ready for it, the whole 9 yards. They had like I want to say 16 or 17 match card with this pay-per-view, and it went absolutely. There's just Sensational Sherry, and of course
Michael St. John
and the Wild Man in WWE was the teacher in New Jersey. Oh gosh, used to eat the turnbuckle. Would tear up the turnbuckle. Who am I talking
George
about?
the Animal Steel.
George the Animal Steel, yes. Great guy. I'd never worked with George. I'd worked with Sherry before. She was a Birmingham lady. Jerry is super professional, Sherry. But George was, I had talked to him for about an hour. He was one of the most, he's not only a creative mind, but he had great stories and a smart guy, just a brilliant guy. But anyway, the announcer, there was a guy out of Vegas that was not a wrestling announcer. It was a friend of the promoters, but he did some boxing shows out of Vegas. He was on Top Rank Boxing at one time, and they had a couple of color people that did the thing, and they had me backstage in the tuxedo doing the interviews and the pre-show and the pre-tapes and all that, which was fine. And I remember at the end of the show, the main event was Yokozuna and Jake, and the finish got all screwed up Jake was drunk and out of his head and staggered to the ring, and it just got the match just started. It was going downhill. So they finally sent somebody to the ring with a chair and cold cocked Jake, and Yokozuna pinned him, and that was it. And I remember everybody being paid being paid by a
microphone.
Yeah, I know. My cat just rolled over it again. Everybody got paid with a check, and I'll never forget. George Steele came to me and he said, "Go cash your check." He said, "Go to the window at the casino and cash your check now." I went, "Oh, okay." So I did, but I understand there were some checks that didn't get cashed. So unfortunately, there were some people that got. But it was a great star. It was a star-studded lineup but it just bombed, failure on pay-per-view, and it from about midway through the matches, you just knew that it was just going to go downhill from there. And unfortunately for the promoters, it did. And that was that was me holding up Jake Roberts in backstage back then. And I would say this about Jake: he's a funny drunk. He was a funny drunk back then.
Next picture of the day, we'll go to Blytheville, Arkansas. The second place I ever watched professional wrestling. First place at the American Legion Arena in Jonesboro, Arkansas. Second place was the American Legion building in Blytheville, Arkansas on 2nd Street, right beside the American Legion hut. I was there last week. Now, the building been closed down, but it's still standing. This picture was taken last Friday. So there is the current look of the American Legion Arena. A couple of funny stories about that building. They had 2 different doors to the dressing rooms, but everybody could dress together. The people, a lot of the older buildings were like that, and the fans wouldn't know that. But you came in the front of the back door, and you go around in front of the people and the bleachers, and you had to duck down to get into the door. Well, one particular time, big Plowboy Frazier, big giant Frazier, almost 7 foot tall. So he was going in, and somebody was heckling him and yelling at him, and he was yelling back, and he wasn't paying attention, and he forgot to duck. He forgot to duck, and he ran into that door. Boom! He took a big bump, knocked his big ass out, and blocked the deadgum thing, and he was knocked out for 10 minutes. The matches started, and they couldn't get him out of the way, and the heel wrestlers would walk over his knocked out big ass to get over him to get to the ring. It was the damnedest thing I'd ever seen in my life. 1984, Blytheville, Arkansas, the American Legion Arena. Again, we look at that classic building again for just a quick second. This was the building, was inside. It was a wet county, means that at the matches they could sell beer, which meant that people would spill beer. Also, this particular night, I was in charge of the box office. Eddie Marlin's Town, he was not there. So I was checking up and counting the money and getting everybody secure. After the show was over, and the main event was Randy Savage against somebody, Leaping Lanny Poffo on the car earlier in the night. It was a hell of a house. We made a lot of money. It might have been Lawler and Savage. So I'm finished up and giving the American Legion their percentage, all the things you do, pay the tickets, whatever you have to do, I did. So I go out of the ticket office at the front of the building. Now, Randy Savage had come out that same little hallway. This was a different time. This was years before that Frazier fell, but it's the same hallway. And he says, "Randy," and Lanny was right beside him. So, "Randy, I want to ask you a question. Come here a minute." So like an idiot, I had my briefcase, had the money in it. Thank goodness it was locked and secured. But I started running to Randy Savage. Started running to him, slept on the damn beer, took a face first dead-gum bump. Blood went everywhere. So I had Randy Savage. Now the people had left the building. The wrestlers were getting dressed and all that. So I was bleeding all over the place. I had Randy Savage and Lanny Poffo being Dr. Macho Man and Dr. Leaping Lanny. And they fixed me all up. And they took me around the corner to the hospital where I got fixed up. The hospital people wouldn't let me drive, and I had a friend of mine and a buddy of his come from Jonesboro to pick me up. Jonesboro is just 51 miles, but that is that picture of the day. Another picture I want to show everybody, I stole on Facebook, stole a couple of pictures on Facebook recently. Both of them cool pictures. This picture is a current picture in the last week. Michael, you will love this, of Jerry Lawler, Bill Dundee, and Bill Dundee's friend and driver and kind of agent Rex Luther, I think is his name. And this classic picture, Lawler fresh out of the hospital. I think he's looking good. There's the superstar, and there is Rex, who I know, but you don't, Michael. And certainly, I went to the American Legion story without giving you time to talk. I'm trying to rush this along, but I won't do that to you now. Your rapid fire thoughts on the picture of the king and the superstar. It's like good old days. I love it. Love it.
Look at the shirt that Bill Dundee's wearing, and it's a very close to what they're posing as now.
Yes.
And look at the difference between Bill and Jerry from that shirt and now. And, when you look at, I have and I'm pretty much in the neighborhood of the age of these gentlemen. And when I look at these now, to me, Jerry Lawler still looks like Jerry Lawler a lot. Bill has aged, I think, a little more so. And I know, does he still have the condition he has with the hiccups that he had, or has he been able to?
As far as I know, he don't answer his phone anymore. I hadn't talked to him in 7-8 months, or maybe longer than that.
Well, I think when you look at this picture, it really tells the tale of time. But it's so great to see both of these legends together once again. And I got to tell you, one thing I'm noticing about Jerry, it looks like Jerry's gaining some weight back, and that's a good sign. That's a very good sign.
No doubt about it. And I'm sending Adam a picture with a request. Everybody, a big part, a huge part, somebody and a group of gentlemen that don't get enough credit, because you can't have a wrestling match without a referee. You just can't do it. A referee is so important. To tell you the truth, they don't get a lot of money. These days, I don't know what Tony Khan pays their referees. I'm sure a lot more money than our referees got. I'm sure WWE pays their referees a lot of money, and God bless them. And as much as they travel, the business is just more lucrative now with the national money. We were talking about billions of dollars a little bit ago. So share the wealth. One of the former referees of the USWA, kind of a jack of all trades, and his son is watching this show and watched the show a couple of weeks ago and contributed with a lot of great questions. He is the first cousin of the little man, of Jerry Jarrett. He was somebody that worked on Jerry Jarrett's property. He did a little bit of everything. This is a classic picture. And Dave Brown was not very happy with Paul Neighbors right now, because I can tell you what the problem is. And I can tell you, Paul, I made a lot of trips with Paul, but he became shady. He became shady. He started refereeing and helping the bad guys win. He cheated. Now, Paul, I hate to hurt your feelings and talk about your dad, but look at the disgust in, I'm working, people. I hope you realize that. Anyway, Dave looking disgusted. Paul is saying, what did I do? Now, I want to show you a current picture that not only includes Paul, very nice guy, no doubt about it, even though he did try to get me fired one time, but that's okay. It didn't work. Here is the picture currently. A lot of people tried to get me fired, by the way. Here is a classic picture that was in a newspaper. This is Paul Neighbors and his son. We called him Rooster. He'll probably get hot at me, but it's my show. And so if I want to call somebody Rooster, I'll call the son of a gun a Rooster. Anyway, it's Paul Neighbors Jr. This is Paul Sr., and he was inducted into the Rocking Wrestling Federation Hall of Fame. Now, Paul, why don't you put in there, because I can't read that article, why don't you write me a comment and tell me where that was?
That's a great picture, by the way. And I always liked Paul. Paul was always a super guy, and we had some great conversations together, and rode up the road many a times. He would be driving when we'd be going to Memphis on a Saturday morning, and he would referee. And like you said, he was a master at what he did, and he was a guy that you just like to be around. And I remember some days at the Sportatorium. I'm sure Paul would remember these too, that we'd be sitting back and smelling that old stale popcorn and beer in that building. And he'd look at me and he'd say, "Boy, this place is old." And I'm like, "Yeah, it is." And it was just, Paul was fun to be around. And for being inducted into the Rock and Wrestling Federation Hall of Fame, it is well deserved. God bless you. And hope you continue to live a long and prosperous life. And by the way, I'm not going to call him Rooster. I'm going to call him Paul Jr. I remember you as well. And thank you for all the nice words that you put into this show, but more so, thank you for taking care of your dad, because he's a wonderful guy.
Now, this was taken at the Armory, in Gallatin, Tennessee. You're familiar with Gallatin as well. And Bradford, yes, Jerry Lawler has got his speech back. Paul saying that his dad loved his coffee. And now I'm going to be just totally honest. And hear me out, Paul, as I evaluate this. Paul was refereeing at a time that the other referee, the only referee we had at the time, was Frank Morrell. Now, Frank Morrell was somebody I traveled with, good friends with, was a great wrestler, drew a lot of money. Frank was not a good referee at all. Didn't let Hales get heat, that sort of thing. Now, as a straight referee, I thought Paul was better than Frank, but Paul, I like the Jerry Calhoun type, the Aubrey Wayne type, the different smaller guys. Paul was older at the time. And so even though in the ring, if the talents, a lot of talents would flat out come up to me and say, "Please, PG did this. Don't put Frank Morrell as a referee in our match." And a lot of Hills did the same thing, and they didn't with Paul. Paul was a more popular referee with the boys, but they would get a little frustrated. Now, Paul did an adequate job refereeing, and at that time period, he was the best referee we had. There's no doubt about that. But he wasn't a great referee. Where he was great, absolutely great, Michael, I thought we've seen the Hill referee thing done a million times. It goes back to, I saw it in the 70s with Don Pruitt and Jackie Fargo program. Goes way, way, way back. Paul feuding with Jeff and feuding with Lawler and being involved in a situation with Lawler, Vince McMahon helping Paul. It's classic stuff for
Heel
sure.
Heel reffing, heel refereeing. It is classic. You're absolutely right. Randy, and you bring up a good subject. Back in the days, the wrestlers toned their shtick. They toned their sport by going on the road and wrestling in an every night scenario in many cities in front of different crowds. And the question I have, is there a referee school, or has there ever been a referee school for wrestling referees? Because it's an art form to be a good referee.
It's hard.
My favorite referees of all time, and not in any particular order, was Ronnie West. I thought Ronnie West was an incredible referee. Jerry Calhoun, like you said, I mean, you could write a book about Jerry Calhoun's style of refereeing and probably sell a bunch of copies to people that want to be professional wrestling referees. A guy named Pat Malone, who used to be the Green Shadow, refereed a lot in the Alabama area. If Pat Trammell was here right now, he'd talk about Pat Malone. a gentleman named Bobby D out of Huntsville, whose son makes a lot of the professional wrestling belts that you see for both the WWE and for AEW down in Orlando, Florida. Those guys, they had a talent about it. There was a guy out of Atlanta that everybody talks about, and I can't recall his name, but watched him a million times on Georgia Championship Wrestling. Absolutely the best. He was with WCW, absolutely the best. It's funny you mentioned Frank Morrell, because when we first started working the Dallas territory with the WCCW, they had one referee that was really, really good that sort of became a right hand for Jerry Jarrett as we proceeded. But they had a guy named Bronco Lubitsch, who used to be an old wrestler. And to me, Frank Morrell's style and Bronco Lubitsch's style were very, very similar, but they came out of the same era. So that's probably why.
Another referee that passed away way too young. He was one of Eddie Marlin's lifelong friends and best friends, and one of Jerry Jarrett's best friend as well. And he was a great referee. Did you know David Ferguson?
No, I did not. I have heard stories of David Ferguson. And by the way, Tommy Marlin's brother, or Eddie Marlin's brother, Tommy Marlin, when they would bring him in as a special referee, was one of the best there was. I mean, you talk about somebody stay out of the way, and that's what a referee in professional wrestling should do. Stay out of the way, get involved to break a bad hold or to start the count. But other than that, stay away from, don't get involved in the action, in my humble opinion. And the best referees are in the ring. They're like baseball umpires. They're part of the game, but they're not really they're not really a noticeable part of the game.
It's 8:01. We're coming at you. We're talking Memphis Wrestling. It's Michael St. John. It's Randy Hales. Prayers to Chris Ellis that lost a friend unexpectedly. Also, proud of Pat Trammell's daughter, Meg, her athletic awards banquet. It's her senior year at I forgot the name of the school. Do you know where?
She's at Baylor, and she
at
had Baylor
in Chattanooga. Absolutely. Her awards banquet is tonight, so they're not with us here today. Now, here's the thing. I want to shout out to Adam, who doesn't appear much on this show. He's inside without a camera. He can talk every once in a while if something comes up he likes talking about. But here's the thing. He does such a great job as we wing this show a lot. We have it prepared. Here's 7 pages of notes, and it is prepared, but we wing it. It's live and it's great. But when we mention something, Adam will send us a private message and say, hey, I have this picture or I have that picture. He just does things great. I feel sorry for Adam, though, because I want to point out he is on a different time zone than we are. Michael, are you on the Central thing? Are you on Central or are you on Eastern?
No, we're Central time zone. When you get into Georgia and you cross the line just east of Chattanooga, where I-59 comes in, is when you cross into the Eastern time zone to our east. So I'm about an hour away from the Eastern time zone.
It's tough on Michael when we go over, and me and you together tends to go over every time. We're not going to go past not too much past 9 o'clock today. So I'm going to edit as we go, and I'm going to skip around here as we go. It's not fair. The last thing I want to do is Adam, certainly, and it's true. We talked last night. It's possible because sometimes something comes up. I can produce a show and host it at the same time. I'm just not near as good at it as he is. I'd hate to lose him on this show. So we're going to be more self-conscious, and we're both professionals. So we should, we deal with Chris and Pat, who's not used to time cues. We are, Michael. So let's try to be out of here by 9 o'clock tonight or a couple of minutes after.
Let me say this about Adam. No show on television or on video is any good without a good producer.
Yeah.
And Adam is one of the best that I've ever worked with.
Absolutely.
And next to the floor manager, the floor director in Memphis at Channel 5, Adam holds a gold star in my mind. And by the way,
Bob Crone.
But yes, Bob. But I just want to mention Bradford mentioned the fact that he thinks I was talking about Nick Patrick as the referee from Georgia. He's absolutely right. Thank you for that.
Now we're going to look at some other pictures, and it's somebody that Paul had mentioned earlier, and we'll let again rapid fire because the person that knows more about this guy, I've seen some video, and I think the guy's funny and he's a character, and I like that absolutely for sure that he was humorous and he had a personality, all this stuff. Let's show the picture. Harry Thornton from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and here's Michael St. John to tell you about Harry Thornton.
Boy, Harry Thornton, you talk about a legend in the city. Harry Thornton was the man, the legend of Chattanooga, Tennessee, not only as the voice of professional wrestling, Nick Goulas, Roy Welch Wrestling, the Goulas Welch Wrestling Company, but Harry was also on radio and was the host of a morning show there that had the highest ratings of any local television morning show in America at the time. And he used the word folks a lot. If you were talking with Harry Thornton, you couldn't go through a conversation when you wouldn't hear the word folks. And he was the host on Channel 12, WDEF television, and was on radio on WDEF AM in Chattahoochee back in the day. And I have a distinction. It's an honor to sit in the same chair, but I had a distinction of when Harry had his heart attack back in 1979. For several weeks, I rode down with Nick Goulas, and a couple of times I had to drive the Sheik down to television at Channel 12. And people would always, the thing that people just wouldn't get over is the fact, where's Harry? Not that they didn't like what was going on or didn't accept me, because Chattanooga, I still get some accolades out of there every now and then. But it was just that Harry was so entrenched to his community. You talk about a city connect, which I mentioned earlier, Chattanooga, Harry Thornton. They were one.
Did Harry, I think Paul is mentioning, did Harry ever work with Tom Renesto?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
What kind of team were they?
Now Harry, I don't recall Harry wrestling unless it was a gimmick match.
No, I'm saying Tom Renesto announced at one time.
Tom Ernesto was actually announcing for Nick when I came into the picture, and when George brought me in, and Nick didn't like Tom as an announcer because Tom was booking, and Nick always said that Tom was what was the words he used? He wasn't warm on TV where he wasn't believable. He didn't have believability because he was a wrestler. And people knew he was a wrestler at that time. I think a lot of people knew he used to be one half of the Assassins. Tom Ernesto was a brilliant guy, and I learned a lot from him.
Good booker. Until when he took over Memphis in '85, it had passed him by. It really did.
Right. Well,
Randy Savage told me that he thought that Tom Ernesto was sabotaging the territory. He really did.
Wow. Well, that was funny because that was when Tom left Nick. That was the sort of the story there, that Tom was, what he was trying to do is drive the houses down so Nick would have to sell, and that Tom was part of a group that was going to buy it. I had heard that rumor all that time too. His son wrestled, and I know one of the rubs and one of the reasons that I was able to become the announcer right away, there was a rub going on. Nick was wanting George pushed. Tom was wanting his son pushed, and it was oil and water.
His son later was a referee and did the heel referee thing, not as good as Paul Neighbors did, but he was. And then he was a heel manager. We called him, it was Tom Renesto Jr., but he was called Tom Branch, which was his mother's name. His mother was a female wrestler. We have one other rapid fire deal. This is the classic early 70s, 72, 73, 74 from Louisville, Kentucky. And let's see the picture of Jerry the King Lawler and Sam Bass going to the ring with the security and with everybody around. A classic picture, Michael.
Jerry Lawler in that picture looks like Don Green.
He does.
It's an amazing thing. And Sam had gained weight at that point. The thing about Sam was he was a skinny little nerd, and everybody hated the skinny little nerd. And at that picture, it looks like Sam had actually gained weight. We lost Sam, by the way too early, tragically in that automobile accident. where would wrestling have gone had Sam Bass still been around? I think it'd have gone.
Hey, when we get to, we'll save
place.
that thought, Michael, because when we get into the dark side of Memphis wrestling, we will talk about that in just a second. And this is where we're going to edit the show, and this is where we're going to go in a different direction. The plan was to review the series Dark Side of the Ring past subjects and preview this season. And if you could go ahead and put up that, and I'm going to quickly, we're not going to discuss it. I'm just going to talk about the shows that were on Vice TVs with graphic support. Adam, certainly not that one, but the Dark Side of the Ring. That we'll get to the Mid-South Wrestling one in a minute. And if you could mute our cameras where it'll be black on there, and we'll give you the series that premiered April the 10th, 2019. Episode number 1 was the Match Made in Heaven about Randy Savage and Elizabeth. Episode number 2 was about the Montreal screw job finish between Brett and Sean. Number 3, the killing of Bruiser Brody. Number 4 was the tragedy of the Von Erichs. Number 5 was the mysterious death of Gino Hernandez. Number 6 was the life of the fabulous Moolah. Season 2 started off with a 2-parter on Chris Benoit. Number 3 was the life and crimes of New Jack. Then the story on the brawl for it all. Jimmy Snuka, dead girlfriend in his motel room. The death of Dino Bravo. The David Schultz slap around the world. A cocaine story about UWF promoter Herb Abrams. Then the last ride with the Road Warriors. And certainly the tragic death of Owen Hart. The third season, first 2 episodes were on Brian Pillman. Episode 3 was violent Nick Cage, had no idea. Number 4 was a collision in Korea, the New Japan WCW show in 95. Number 5 was Becoming the Ultimate Warrior. Number 6 was about Grizzly Smith. Number 7, about Dynamite Kid. Number 8, Luna Vachon. Number 9, the steroid trials of 1994. Preview for this season that begins in just days, I think. They lead off the season with a story on Chris Candido and Sonny Tammy Sitch. Number 2 story, the sad story of Magnum TA's wreck. Magnum's wreck that took place October 86. Number 3, the unhinged monster Abdullah the Butcher, currently 82 years old, and the troubled life of Marty Jannetty. Now we will deep dive certainly in the dark side of Memphis wrestling, but just summarize, Michael. We'll give you 2 or 3, 4 minutes, and we can't get in detail on any of those, but just those subjects, which particular ones, if any, did you see, and what do you think about this series? So talk 2, 3, 4 minutes about the dark side of the dream, and how was that good for wrestling, bad for wrestling? Your thoughts as you go full screen.
Well, first of all, I've heard the rumor too that Vice TV has filed for bankruptcy. So you're seeing this now on streaming. So that, again, where TV is going. I've seen the majority of the dark side of the rings thing. I have an issue sometimes with the moderator. I honestly think Dutch Mantel did a great job on that when they used Chris Jericho. I didn't think Chris was the voice for that. I would have loved to have moderated some of those, to be honest with you, but I thought Dutch did a better job. Of all of those, the ones that interested me were the ones that I had some kind of knowledge of, and the Brody, the murder of Brody, Bruiser Brody was one of them. I thought the show on Moolah was really deep and got into things that I did not know regarding her and her place where all the wrestlers lived, or I want to say conclave, but that's the wrong word. But that was very interesting. The show I thought they did the best job on, honestly, was New Jack, because New Jack was as controversial of a character that ever came through our area. And I know as a wrestling announcer, there are not a lot of wrestlers that I ever got the little heebie-jeebies about, or was afraid that maybe they'd go off on me or something like that. The two that I think in my professional career that sort of gave me that feeling were Bruiser and New Jack. Bruiser because of his intimidating style, and New Jack because the only times I was around New Jack, he was high, and it wasn't a good high. Some guys would get high and would mellow out. Some guys would get high and get violent. And that was the New Jack story. So I thought they did a great job on New Jack. As far as a series, I think it's a story that needed to be told. I don't think in this day and time it was negative towards wrestling. I think if anything, it may have shined some light on some of the more controversial figures or events that have happened in the world of professional wrestling. And I do think it was well written and well produced. So that's my take.
Okay. Now we got 45 minutes left in the show, 45 minutes left in the show. Again, this has to be rapid fire, and I got a list, and if you want to add stuff in it, it's fine. But a WWE Hall of Famer and a Memphis wrestling mainstay made this quote to Brandon Baxter recently, talking about kind of the way the wrestling business is and the way Memphis is. See if you agree or disagree. And again, Michael, normally you weren't on the road 6 days a week, going to every town, seeing the stuff that Jeff saw, seeing the stuff that I saw, having to deal with talent, mad at money, kind of mad about negotiating finishes, whatever. It's a whole different deal. So obviously you rode in the car with Jeff or Jerry or Eddie or whatever, but dealing with that stress every day. Jeff has always said, that gum exposed who was the source there, that Memphis drama was unlike almost anywhere else, even in the dying days. Always something. All the knocking, backstabbing, political maneuvering. Now, I knew that went on, certainly. I was a part of it sometime, and many of people tried to cut my throat many times. So it happened. I just figured, Michael, that it was just the wrestling business. Because honestly, and we glorified all that, there's a seedy carnival side of wrestling. And it's like the wild west. It's like a bunch of gypsies on parade to steal that old Sawyer Brown song. There was a lot of unethical. There was a lot of dishonest. There was a lot of drugs. There's a lot of sex. And we'll go through that all over. However, apparently the drama and the backside stuff was worse in Memphis than other territories. Can you speak of that? Or do you disagree with that?
Well, I don't necessarily agree with it, but from what I was exposed to, I missed the part about the sex and drugs because it was hidden pretty well behind, I never saw it outrageously exposed, but I did see, the results of some of the drug-induced ways and means of some of these wrestlers. I would disagree right away by saying if all is, the curtain is torn back, I would say Dallas and the Sportatorium stuff and all that had a lot more drama and a lot more drugs and a lot more of the seedy side than I ever saw in Memphis. But again, when I was involved, when I was coming down, remember, I was just an independent paid talent. I was with Jerry Jarrett. I was with Frank, or with Eddie Marlin. I was with Jeff. I was with you at times. I was with Lance and with Dave, and we were sort of, I'm not saying above what was going on in the dressing room, but we were sort of, kept, I won't say in the dark, but we were sort of our own. We were, and not to say the other boys and the girls weren't professional, they were, but the professionalism of the announcers and the promoters and that side of it was a little different than the professionalism, if you would, of the wrestlers and the talent. And I didn't see a lot of talent that was bad people. I saw a lot of talent. Wrestling, I see a lot of, and even in today's, when I meet wrestlers that are wrestling today, a lot of wrestlers that are involved in this sport are introverted people. And wrestling is a way for them to be extroverts and to put on that persona, whether it be Randy Savage. To me is a perfect example. Randy Savage behind the scenes, one-on-one, was just like me and you talking right now. I mean, there was no perception or denials or anything. He was just Randy. And if anything, he was a great sports person. He loved baseball, could talk it and play it and do it. And so I think we're sort of, I don't know if we were kept in the dark or it was just the people that we were associated with during those events that I wasn't privy to a lot of the quote unquote dark side of it.
Paul Neighbors, I want to put this comment up real quick as he asked a question. Was Sean and Brandon Baxter kin? Absolutely not. First of all, I don't remember Sean Baxter's, who was here in probably 87. I don't remember Sean's real name. His name wasn't Baxter. And Brandon Baxter's real last name was certainly not Baxter. They both made up names and they were here in different eras, so they were not kin. So some of this, when we talk about Memphis wrestling, we are going to talk about more the sad side of Memphis wrestling than the dark side, even though we will get to it. I'm hoping Michael can help me remember some of the dark sides. And we're going to start with certainly, Michael mentioned it earlier, the 1976 July car wreck that took the lives of Jerry Lawler's great friend and manager Sam Bass and the Dominoes tag team. And that tag team was Frankie Hester and Pepe Lopez. It was at mile marker, if I'm right, 169 going eastbound back from Memphis, a night in 76 that Jerry Lawler wrestled Harley Race for the World Heavyweight Championship. And I think I'm correct on that. Didn't research that, but it was definitely a World Championship match. Lawler had work done in his car and was in Memphis a weekend. So the Dominoes didn't have a ride and asked Sam. Sam had been asked by Lawler to fly to Memphis and ride back to Nashville with him, but he was being the nice guy that he was. He was a sweetheart of a guy, no doubt about it. The 1976 that changed the career, and it was one of the biggest blows in the history of Lawler's life. There's no doubt. And Lawler was hot and hot heel, but then he was the uber baby face later, 77, and then again after the broken leg. Would that uber run ever would have happened with Sam still alive? It just changed we've talked about this several times on the show. It changed Lawler's career forever, and we lost one of the great things. And before we turn it back over to Michael to talk about Sam, I remember vividly the following Saturday, Lance Russell opened up the Channel 13 wrestling show in 1976, and they just had some kind of shot, maybe of the statue. Whatever. No, they wasn't using the statue then. I don't know what the shot. Maybe a still picture of Sam. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, the wrestling world lost uh, the manager and friend of Jerry Lawler, Sam Bass. Our thoughts and prayers are out to his family. Also lost the Dominoes, Pepe Lopez, and Frank Hester. He said, every Saturday morning, said old Sam would come up to me and say, Lancer, it's time for you to ring the bell. It's time to separate the men from the boys. That would Lance open. And then he said, in honor of Sam Bass, we ring the bell. Ding, ding, ding. And that's how Lance Russell rang the bell. Michael St. John, obviously, we're running short on time, and I want to look at the time. We got 35 minutes, and we're not going a minute over today. Not a minute over. So, thoughts on Sam Bass? This is a two-part series. We'll have to continue it to next week. No doubt about it. But go ahead on Sam. Microphone. Michael is frozen. So, Michael, you are frozen at this time. You might be, it happened to Adam yesterday. Michael is completely frozen. So, if you can hear me, I would suggest get out of the room and re-log in to the link. And certainly we will have you comment on Sam Bass, and you're totally frozen at this point, and Michael has gone away. Hey, I'm Randy Hales. We'll get audio as now we'll bring in Michael St. John, my buddy and my co-host. Michael, are you there?
I am. I sent you a little note. We're having storms in the area, so it's affecting our signal. So I apologize.
That happened to Adam yesterday. Quick thoughts, Sam Bass.
Never got to work with him, heard nothing but good things about him. And I think the wrestling world would have been better had he lived. But unfortunately, God needed a good manager back then, and I think he took Sam.
You will have more information about the next subject than I will, because I did not see him in my time. About the time I became a wrestling fan and got into the business, this guy had already no longer was an active wrestler, but he was still around. And maybe you can look for a picture, Adam, of this guy. He was one of Nick Goulas's top baby faces. There's no doubt about it. He was also a booker on the Birmingham end of the territory. We're talking about Lynn Rossi. Lynn Rossi, from everything that I ever was told, was a great wrestler and a great person. Later on in life, he ran for many, many decades, a vitamin store in Nashville that was very successful. He had a car wreck in about 1971, 1972, something like that, and was no longer able to wrestle. Lynn lived to a ripe old age of 91 years old and died in 2020. There's a picture with Lynn Rossi, and he was a bodybuilder, Michael, before there was bodybuilders. I'm putting over Adam again, man. There's no doubt. I mean, he goes with the flows, because I can be aggravating as I lead this show and go in different directions. I get things in my head that I don't have on paper, because I try to put everything up there. But Adam is right there with me every single time. So tell us about Lynn Rossi. And I think we have, again, having storm problems, Michael, in Chattanooga. And Michael went away again real quick with the comments. Daryl Bruff says referee is Bob Holland in that picture we saw. Appreciate it, Stuart. And folks, I'm not getting to everything for sure. Melinda says Joey wrestled 2, and I think Paul Neighbors put that comment up there. I remember you being in the office running things on the phone with Lawler while little man was in Cinnabon. Very busy time in your life. It absolutely was, no doubt about it. How about Lynn Rossi? Michael, do we have you? As Michael is not even at his desk, this is Talking Memphis Wrestling. This is the 16th day of May. Michael St. John and Randy Hales. It's 8:30 Central Standard Time. The dark side of Memphis wrestling. Number one was the death of Sam Bass, July of 76. The wreck of Lynn Rossi. And man, this guy was a babyface, a star, was in the office for sure. Big time Lynn Rossi. Number three, changed the face of the Memphis territory. Absolutely 100% changed a lot of people's life. Jerry Lawler's, Jerry Jarrett, Eddie Marlin, Christine Jarrett, everybody's life for the best, but it changed Nick Goulis's life and Roy Welch's for the worse, even though Roy just lived a couple of more months. And I'm talking about the Jerry Jarrett takeover, the war of 1977, followed by Jerry Lawler's attempted takeover in 1983 that could have happened to Jerry Jarrett, what he did to Nick Goulis for sure. As Michael St. John, as we are about 29 minutes away from the end of this show, real quick, let us know about Lynn Rossi.
I've met Lynn on several occasions, talked to Lynn. Very bright guy. But Lynn was one of those old shooters. I mean, baby face from the 50s. He was on national television for years, or for several years, out of Chicago when he was young. He was the ultimate professional. He always, Lynn, I never saw Lynn kid with anybody. Lynn was this business is serious, and by God, you better be serious. Very complimentary on me when I started out early, gave me a couple of good words of advice. You know, it was tragic because Lynn Rossi came to the territory and Nick Goulis and Roy Welch teamed him up with Tex Riley. And Lynn Rossi and Tex Riley was one of the top babyface teams in the whole territory, in the history of the territory, from what I understand. Tex Riley was killed in a car wreck, and then Lynn Rossi was killed in a car wreck as well. So it was not killed, excuse me, but was injured, broke his back, and could never wrestle again after the car wreck. And at one time was said he would never walk again, but Lynn, a bodybuilder and somebody that really put dedication into his rehab, was able to walk. He walked with a limp, but it was always great to see Lynn. He had a son named Joey Rossi that unfortunately didn't live up to the Rossi name, and passed away at a very early age as well.
That was a picture that Adam just put up there, just a candid shot with Lynn, the typical baby face, Michael. And we saw that and Lynn visiting with the fans. And I thought that was a great picture. Well, just a fantastic picture. Real quick, the Jerry Jarrett takeover, the war of 1977, thoughts of that, and how much were you aware of, and where were you living at the time in 1983 when Jerry Lawler and Lance Russell attempted a takeover of Jerry Jarrett's company? How much were you aware of those? Certainly, you lived through the Nick Goulis situation, the Lawler attempt.
The coup, as it was referred to, the coup. I was living about a half a mile from Jerry Jarrett's house, and was doing the promos and the inserts and the cards with Randy West at his house, and would be at Jerry's house. Unbeknown, and I think I may have mentioned this before, but Jerry was interested in buying a radio station with me and a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, Bill Button. We had identified a radio station out of Glasgow, Kentucky, 100,000 watt FM, that later in the year sold for $10 million. and we had an opportunity to buy it for $400,000. And the timing was wrong because about the time we were ready to pull the trigger was the time that the coup came about, and Jerry had to turn his attention, and as a result, we never made that deal. But I'll be honest with you, that I think Jerry Jarrett was hurt more so that by that deal. Did he get mad about it? Yeah, but more so, I think he was hurt about the fact that Lance and Jerry Lawler would attempt such a thing. But again, it boiled down to money, and basically Jerry Jarrett control the money of the territory and of the business at the time.
Now I'm going to talk about a sensitive subject that somebody that you've done a lot of on-screen work with, somebody that I've done on-screen work when I was a Hill for Power Pro. He was one of the first guys I managed. We had a lot of fun. Somebody me and Jeff Judd used to drive down the roads with early in Jeff's career, and he was a great tag team partner of Jeff Jarrett. There's no doubt about it. And we're talking about Billy Joe. We're talking about Billy Travis. And Billy was just a classic thing. And I could do shows and probably will on Billy Travis because he had his demons, all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to talk about an incident I don't know you're aware of. And this would have been between 87 and 89. And I can't tell you exactly what year that was. But there was an incident at a spot show in at a high school, and we ended up losing that spot show. Good picture of Billy and the guitar with Michael St. John and Stacy and Lance Russell, and a wonderful, wonderful picture there. But it was a situation that, the wrestlers were a lot of times they were there and they travel gone from home every day. 100% they go away from home and they like the young ladies, and the young ladies like the wrestlers. That was a big part of it. The nice word for it is the rock and roll people, the country music people call them groupies. Anyway, Billy Travis, and I never got the real story, but some young lady went home and told her parents or told a teacher or told something that Billy Travis in a closet area or hallway area, and I don't know specifics, but the police came and Billy Travis was arrested, and Billy Travis did about, it seems like he was gone and he was in jail and he was gone for a year. From business wise, sponsors wouldn't touch us for a long time. For sure, there was no doubt about it. It's just a situation with Billy, and then later on in years, Billy, who we lost at a young age in his town where his mother lived in Kentucky, and it was a heart attack. Billy just had a unique lifestyle that he was heavily involved in drugs and had a cocaine issue and a lot of issue uh, with that. Billy would his biggest enemy was himself. But Billy in the ring was great as a personality. Was a great one of my favorite people to ride with. One of my favorite people to hang out with. Just a super nice guy that wouldn't hurt a flea. And when, Michael, do you agree with me on a dark side of Memphis wrestling thing? We have to tell about the sad story of Billy Travis. We really do.
Well, you hit the nails on the head about him being a nice guy. Billy lived a fun life, and Billy was. You very seldom did you see Billy down. He was always
No.
up, and he was energy, and he would. Boy, I used to. I really. He would always brighten the day when you'd walk in the dressing room, and he'd yell across the room, "Michael St. John," and then he'd come over and he'd hug you, or he'd give you a handshake, or give you a pat on the back. Never a negative out of Billy. Never a negative out of Billy. But the other side of outside of the wrestling persona, Billy had his problems, and that was unfortunately in much of his undoing. And to me, one of the most and when this happened, I mean, we went live. It was not prepared. It was not pre-taped. It was not. We had no idea it would happen. Was when the police showed up at Channel 5 during the TV show,
Right.
arrested him on screen, and we went with it. I mean, we were told, we got word from Jerry, go with this, and we did.
From Jerry Lawler.
Yes,
From Jerry Lawler. Yes.
He said, just go with this. And we did. And you talk about live TV at its best. I mean, that drama was playing out in front of the whole world. And it was on Memphis television live of Billy Travis being arrested and escorted out of the building. And that was because of missed child support payments, as I understand.
Oh, absolutely. And Adam threw something in that happened on his birthday. And he was young. Adam was young. June the 28th, 1997. So thanks for that. And I just want to throw in, because Ron says I've heard other people say that about Billy. And this is a sensitive subject, and usually we don't talk about dirt. You know, I understand people want to hear it, but I wanted it to come from me, who was around, who made the town 6 or 7 nights a week and was around for 30 years. You know, I wanted, and somebody that loved Billy Travis and had a relationship with Billy Travis, and he had worked for me in Power Pro and the USWA and all that sort of thing. And we're still here, Ron. Maybe you're frozen up, but we are still 100% still here. But people are interested in the behind the scene stuff, and as this dark side of the ring is going to be in people's head, I think it's very important to deal with that sort of thing. And I would consider the Billy Travis story a tragedy, Michael.
I would say that would be a candidate for the Dark Side of the Ring program.
Oh,
because I think, you know, and Billy had a great upside, and you're right. He let his own personal issues get in the way of a career. I think had Billy continued and could have, you know, rehabbed out and beat the demons, I think Billy could have very well been a superstar in the WCW or the AEW or WWE, without a doubt. I mean,
made millions of dollars.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt. We're off the subject, but Paul's asking Michael if you remember Lloyd, who worked for Jerry and flew that one-seater plane.
I sure do. He'd fly over my house in Hendersonville from time to time, and he'd duck down and he'd wave. And but no, I very much so, and thank you for that memory, Paul. It's very kind of you to bring that up. And I want to say thank you also for the comment about the announcing. I just you know, it's hard, and you're right, Randy. It's hard to talk about the tough side of what we're talking about. But I will say to you, and I'll say this to anybody that's watching and listening, I always respected the people that were in the business for what the business were and what they were doing in the business. And you made a comment about the carnival. You know, this is a business. The sport of wrestling was invented in the carnivals.
Absolutely.
At the fair or the sideshow.
Right.
And you know, it came, and you think about where it is today. And when you started off the show and mentioning, we've come from a carnival environment of people watching a sideshow of people grappling, if you would, to now $400 billion or $400 million being on the line. Think of that. That is mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling. Absolutely mind-boggling. We have about 15 minutes left in the show. This is going to be, we're going to lead off next week, more details about this, and then we'll go with the dark side of the ring and talk about all the tragedy. Are you up for that for next week? Continue this conversation, but we'll go through.
I'm here for you, buddy.
We'll go through some more. The 1982 fight that there's been two different stories out there. I vote for Bill Dundee's side of the story. The fight between with the gun being pulled by Bill Dundee, it was a gang attack on Bill Dundee at a gym in Nashville, Tennessee. So the Bill Dundee Randy Savage fight, and then Bill got the opportunity to go book thanks to Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler, who had pulled the attempted thing, and because he had become the booker, and Dundee just wanted out of here, and Jerry Jarrett wanted to make Dundee some money and got him the booking job, and he took through Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler's blessing a lot of the talent like the Midnight and Cornette and the Rock and Roll, and they went to Louisiana, and the rest is history there. But Dundee was always upset that after he left, that Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler hired Randy Savage and brought him into the Memphis territory, and Dundee was always insulted. Here's the thing. I would say that I was much closer to Bill than I was Randy Savage. However, Randy Savage got mad at me one time, but you just wrestling, talking about the real side of wrestling and stuff, unless you were there every day and in the dressing room every day, you just don't know what went on behind the scenes, because a wrestling dressing room could be a brutal place. But Randy Savage, super nice to me. I loved Angelo, his dad. I loved his brother. And I especially loved one time when I was in a change of my life and had Drew Dundee went to work as a market director for Cole Brothers Circus, and that went away, and I had nothing to go. I was in between. I ended up at the general manager of Jerry Lawler's Hall of Fame Bar and Grill, but for a good 6 months, I lived with Dundee and Donna, his girlfriend Donna, wife Donna, in Germantown, Tennessee. So Bill really took care of me. But here's this situation. I don't want to take sizes. Randy at the time, I think, was on drugs. I think he was always a big time paranoid, and that's been documented. So I'm saying right now, I believe the Dundee side of the story. Do you have an opinion on the Dundee Savage fight, and how much in 1982, when this happened, were you aware?
I was aware. And a couple of things. I know the story from both sides. I've heard Bill's version. I've heard Randy's version. Randy was out when I was programming in Y95 KOY in Phoenix and KOYAM, and Randy was in town with the WWE, and he called me up and said, I'm going to be in Phoenix. I'd like to have lunch with you. Well, I said, well, heck, why don't you come on the radio? We'll have lunch. And then he did the afternoon show, went to a school with us at a school for underprivileged children, was an absolute huge hit, as he was very endearing to the people. And I've heard the story from both sides. Randy, and you mentioned drugs, a lot of people, you say Randy Savage on drugs, you think cocaine, you think meth, you think other bad things. Randy Savage's drugs was steroids. And Randy's attitude sometimes, and people that misuse or overuse those things are noted to have mood swings, are noted to bulk up, and at times have cloudy thoughts in their mind and all sorts of crazy stuff. And Randy admitted to me that he was working out sometimes 2 and 3 times a day at that gym. And I believe that the gym was in Hendersonville, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, I think it was over behind the post office.
Either Hendersonville or Goodlettsville.
It may have been Goodlettsville.
I think it was Goodlettsville.
But and I heard the story, and he said, and he pulled a gun, and he said we were just razzing him, kind of thing. And then I heard Dundee's story, and Dundee didn't take it as a rib or a razz. Dundee took it as a threat. And so, whose story do I believe? I've heard them both, and I think there's truth in both of them. But
that's fair enough. Fair enough.
That's what I think.
The next thing, and we could spend a whole show on this, families involved, and I will just tell the story And let me get my composure, and I'm trying to time manage this show. We got 11 minutes left in the show, and we want to talk about the February 18th death of Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. I wish I would have uploaded a picture of Eddie Gilbert. Hint, 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 hint. The February the 18th death of Eddie Gilbert. Now, Eddie Gilbert, as we know, was a great wrestler. He started his wrestling career in 1979. He was a year older than me. He was the first person to officially talk inside wrestling, behind the scene wrestling, to smarten me up. It was from Eddie Gilbert. Eddie Gilbert and I was close friends. As a matter of fact, I was a vice president of his fan club. I love the Gilberts. I love the Gilberts, and as things evolved in the day, we kind of wanted the same things. He wanted to be in the office, and he was several different things. As Eddie Gilbert was a inductee several different times into the Memphis Wrestling Hall of Fame. So Eddie Gilbert had a car wreck when, and I think, guessing wise, I would say from maybe 79, 80, 81, 82, in that area, a bad car wreck when he was working underneath and was a protege, the on air protege of WWF champion Bob Backlund. Broke his neck, a lot of issues that resulted in pain pills and that sort of stuff. We skip through 1995, and Eddie had left Southeast or Smoky Mountain Wrestling and Jim Cornette to wrestle for Booker Ken Wayne of the Nightmares in Puerto Rico. And this was again February of 1995. I was booking Memphis, and then I was in the car with Wolfie D, and I was headed from Memphis, Tennessee, and was almost to Nashville. And routine was I would drop Whoopi off. I would go home, take an hour nap, then go back to the Nashville matches. Whoopi was asleep, and we get a phone call from Buddy Wayne, Ken Wayne's dad, and he told the information that he talked to Ken, and Ken had just found Eddie Gilbert dead in San Juan, Puerto Rico, or somewhere on on the island. So I told Whoopi, I said, I woke him up and I said, we got to go right to the matches. When Eddie Marlin got there, I told him he was close to his former partner, Tommy Gilbert. And I told him, Michael, I said, you call Tommy. So Eddie Marlin had the responsibility and the sad task of telling Tommy Gilbert his dad, or Tommy Gilbert, his son, had passed away. Tommy screamed it out at his wife Peggy and hung up on Eddie and was just devastated, as you can imagine. Doug had already left Lexington to come to Nashville, and at that time, Doug didn't have the cell phone, so we had to wait. Tommy Rich had Russell TV, and he had got a ride to his mother's house in Nashville. I called Tommy, told him the situation, and I felt, because I was the booker and Doug and I had a great relationship, because I thought Doug was a great talent, and I thought it was my responsibility and not Eddie Marlin's. I thought it was Eddie's responsibility and duty to tell Tommy. I thought it was my responsibility along with help. So I had Tommy come. I said, you got to get here immediately. And so when Doug got there, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And it was on February the 18th, 1995. When Doug got there, Tommy and I, and Eddie Marlin was out there too, got out of the car. We walked up to him and we broke the news that his brother had died. Doug was devastated. I got the spellbinder, Harry Del Rios, to drive him back to Lexington. And then in Doug's car, at, and Doug stopped, or Dale stopped at a truck stop at the 108, and Doug drove home, and Dale hung out at the truck stop to Brian Christopher after the show was over, picked him up and took him back uh, to to Memphis. 6 minutes left. That was I've broken bad news and sad news, and that's sort of thing, Michael. There's no doubt about it. That's the hardest professional task that I ever did in my life. So where were you
I
when
was in
you
Los
heard?
Angeles. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I had just gotten back off of a road trip to one of the stations I was consulting. And my ex told me, she said, Jerry Jarrett has left a message for you on the machine, and you need to listen to it. And I went, okay. And he was just informing me. He said, I know you're living in California now. He said, but I just wanted you to know that very tragically, Eddie Gilbert was found dead in Puerto Rico. And I didn't get a lot of details. Later called and got some information about the visitation and all that stuff. But it was one of those minutes. I didn't get to know Doug as well, or Eddie rather, as well as I got to know Doug as the years went on. But the one thing I'll always say about Eddie, and the times that I had have an opportunity to work with him and talk to him, that I always felt like Eddie was one of those great minds in wrestling, sort
Yeah,
of like Jeff Jarrett,
absolutely.
one of those great minds in wrestling, not only for what was inside the ring, but was for outside the ring and the philosophy and the psychology and all of that. Eddie got it. Eddie got it. And I think when Eddie died, I think Doug sort of took on the role as being the family spokesman and the next family patriarch. And I think Doug did a very, very honorable and
Still
wonderful
does.
job, and still
Yeah,
does to
still
this day,
does.
of
Yeah,
holding up the
Doug
name of
did
the
great.
Gilbert family.
I wanted to clarify one thing, and Paul, I'm talking to you. If memory serves me correct, I thought your dad, Paul, quit being full time with Jarrett Promotions in 1994. 1995, when that situation happened in 1995, I remember it to this uh, day that. From my cell phone, I had called Eddie Marlin and told him, so he rushed to the building. But I purposely didn't want the news told. And Eddie just kind of Eddie Marlin and Doug didn't have a great relationship. Didn't, and so that's why I felt it was my responsibility. So basically, I did the talking with the backup from Tommy Rich, and I remembered also before Doug got there that I was in the front of the building, and when Jerry Lawler got there, and he didn't have a cell phone, Jerry and Brian got there, and I think Spellbinder was with them. So when Lawler got out of the car, I broke the news. And at the end of the night in Nashville, certainly we were able to announce to the people, and that was a sad thing. Where we'll pick up next week, we'll talk more about the death of Eddie Gilbert, the sad situation. I love the Gilberts. I love the Gilberts. Certainly a dark side, a sad side. Also, we'll talk about the 2003 death of Moondog Spot in the ring in a battle royal at age 51 of Moondog Spot. The death of my buddy Brian Christopher Lawler on July the 29th, 2018, age 46. A situation we talked about a few weeks ago, the scandalous end of the USWA with Larry Burton era of Memphis wrestling. We'll talk about the Nature Boy Buddy Landell that died at age 53 in 2015 with a lot of demons. We'll have suggestions from the panel, and also, Michael, we will deep dive into this subject in wrestling. Remember, I said earlier, it was like old time rock and roll. There was a lot of wild and crazy, seedy stuff going on, and a subject we will talk heavily about: sex and all that went with it in the wrestling business and around the wrestling business. Some people was addicted to sex as well as drinking, as well as drugs, and we'll talk about drugs, alcohol, and we also have to talk about steroids. We'll certainly talk about that. And we will go back to the dark side of the ring and talk about all the other scandals, and we'll talk about all the other issues, and we'll do that next Tuesday night. I hope everybody enjoyed the show today. Michael, I thought we had a hell of a show, and we have 1 minute.
Hey, thank you, Randy. Thank you to all the folks that were listening and watching in. And, sometimes we talk about things. I love the idea of the format that we're doing now, where we've got 1 or 2 videos and the rest of the time we're talking about things that are real things to talk about. And thank you again for the opportunity. It's always great seeing you. And I'm glad now that you can see me better. Not that I'm better looking. I've still got the face of the radio,
No, sure you are.
But I just want to say congratulations on number 1 getting done. Number 2, I guess you got your left eye done first. Is that correct?
My right eye.
Right eye, and then left eye next. Hey,
next Wednesday, the 24th, I guess. Yes.
Yeah. I'm sure you're looking forward to it, and we're looking forward to seeing you.
Thank you, Michael, very much. And I was not real good, Michael, about dealing with the comments. Everybody from PJ to Paul to Daryl to Al to Ron, and I'm looking back to Chris, Daryl Bruff, certainly. Paul, I want to have you on the show sometime, and we'll set that up and get you on. Thanks to Adam Dunn for producing, and certainly I'll be on the front row with Bud Rowe tomorrow morning at 9 Central. Be sure 953ticket.com. I'll be on the Power Hour, show number 66 on Monday night at 7. We'll be back here next Tuesday, and then a week from Wednesday, I'll be getting cut on. Until next time, Randy Hales and Michael St. John saying so long, everybody.
Talking Memphis Wrestling with Randy Hales and special guests.